Bathroom. Steam still clinging to the mirror. Derek has just stepped out of the shower, shirt still off, towel in hand. He freezes the moment he sees Claire standing in the doorway. 8 months pregnant, eyes completely dry. Nothing on her face but a silence that cuts deeper than screaming. Claire, voice flat.
Almost calm. The kind of calm that doesn't feel safe. Amber Ross.
The water is still running. Derek doesn't move. Every muscle in his body locks. Derek, stumbling over the words, eyes sliding away from hers. Claire, let me explain. Claire, 47 emails. Starting February 14th, one beat. That was the day you brought me pink tulips. Do you remember that? Derek opens his mouth. Nothing comes out. Claire, one step forward, voice dropping lower, which is somehow worse than shouting. You wrote to her. She trusts me. You use that like a strategy. Derek, voice cracking. It was only one night. I swear to you. Claire, cutting through him, not a single tremor, 47 emails. The room goes still. Derek sinks onto the edge of the bathtub, head in his hands. Claire doesn't look at him anymore. She turns steps even, straight, without looking back. She didn't cry, she didn't scream, she didn't fall apart. She simply walked away, and from that moment, nothing would ever be the same. What happens next is what you won't be able to look away from. Read the full story right below. The voicemail played by accident, that was the thing she would keep coming back to. Years later, in quiet moments, she would think about that. How it wasn't snooping, how she wasn't looking, how she had simply reached past his phone to get to the cabinet and the speaker was on, and the universe made a decision she hadn't been consulted about. It was a Tuesday night in October, 11:47. She knew the exact time because the microwave clock was right in front of her. She had memorized it without meaning to. Claire was in the kitchen, barefoot, 34 weeks pregnant. The baby had been pressing on her ribs since dinner, that insistent little foot, that persistent elbow, that small person who had opinions about everything already. Claire had come downstairs for a glass of cold water. That was all. Just water. Just the ordinary, small mission of a pregnant woman who couldn't sleep. Derek's phone was on the counter, charging. He had left it there. She wasn't going to touch it. She had never been that kind of wife. In 5 years of marriage, she had never gone through his phone, never read his messages, never had reason to. She had been proud of that, in a quiet way. That kind of trust. She reached past it, and the voicemail played. The speaker had been left on. The message had not been cleared. The voice was young, light, a little breathless, the way people sound when they're saying something they've rehearsed, but still aren't sure they should say. Hey, I know you said we needed to stop talking, but I need to hear your voice. I'm sorry. You know where to find me. You always do. Then the robotic prompt. To replay this message, press 1. Claire's hand was still extended toward the cabinet. She did not move it. She did not move at all. The glass of water she had come downstairs for sat on the counter, 3 inches from her fingers, completely irrelevant now. The kitchen was very quiet. The refrigerator hummed. The clock on the microwave said 11:48. She thought, am I going to be sick? She thought, how long? She thought, the baby. Be still. Be still right now. She picked up Derek's phone. The screen lit. She could see the voicemail notification. The contact name was a R. Just initials. 2 letters that meant nothing and everything. She had never asked about a R. She had never had reason to ask. She pressed replay, just once. Hey, I know you said we needed to stop talking. She stopped it. She put the phone back exactly where she found it. Face down. Slightly crooked, the same as before. She was precise about it. She was precise about everything, always had been. Right now, that precision was the only thing that felt real. She walked to the kitchen table. She pulled out a chair. She sat down in the dark. The baby moved. A slow, rolling shift, like a question. I know, Claire said very quietly. I know. She didn't cry. That surprised her even then. She had expected crying. What she felt instead was something colder, something underneath crying. The way the ocean floor is underneath the waves, still, vast, unmoved by the surface noise. She sat there for 40 minutes. She knew it was 40 minutes because she watched the microwave clock. 11:48, 12:03, 12:19, 12:28. She looked at the refrigerator. The crayon drawing stuck there with a magnet, a house, big windows, smiling sun, made by the little girl next door. The grocery list in Derek's handwriting. Sparkling water, the good kind. The ultrasound photo from week 20. Lily's profile, that small perfect nose. She looked at the ceiling. She could hear him breathing upstairs, even and slow. The breathing of a man asleep without complication. She thought, he's sleeping. He is sleeping right now. She thought, you know where to find me. You always do. She thought, how many times has he found her? She stopped herself. Not tonight. She was 34 weeks pregnant. It was almost 1 in the morning. She was not going to do this tonight. She stood up. She drank the water. It had gone warm. She drank it anyway, because she had come down here for water, and she was going to finish what she started. That felt important for reasons she couldn't explain. She went upstairs. She lay down beside him. He was on his side, facing the window. He always slept that way. She lay on her back, the only position that was still comfortable, one hand resting on her belly. She did not touch him. She looked at the ceiling. She waited for morning. Morning arrived gray and wet, October rain against the glass. The sound of it should have been peaceful. It wasn't. Derek's alarm went off at 6:15. She lay still and listened to the ritual of him. The shower, the drawer opening and closing, the particular clatter of wooden hangers as he chose a tie, the sound of him brushing his teeth, the small domestic music of a man who had no idea his world was about to change. Or maybe he did know. Maybe that was the thing she hadn't figured out yet. He appeared in the doorway at 6:28. She could feel him standing there. She opened her eyes. He was in the charcoal suit, hair still damp from the shower. The tie he had chosen was blue, the one she had ordered special for their anniversary 2 years ago. She had spent 4 to 5 minutes on the phone with a tie company explaining the exact shade. She remembered the afternoon she wrapped it. She remembered his face when he opened it. "Claire, you awake? You look pale. You okay?" "Didn't sleep well," she said. "Baby was restless." That was true. That was almost all of the truth. He came in and sat on the edge of the bed. He put his hand on her ankle through the blanket. His hand was warm. He had always had warm hands. She used to love that about him in winter. "You want me to stay home?" he said. She looked at him. His face was open. Concern. The face she had introduced to her mother. The face she had stood across from in a garden in Virginia on a Saturday in June, 87 people watching, saying "I do" with her whole chest. She said, "No go." Her voice didn't shake. She was quietly proud of that. He kissed her forehead. He reached past her to the nightstand and picked up his phone. She realized he had come back upstairs for it at some point while she sat in the kitchen. She noted that. She stored it. She heard the front door close at 6:32. She lay there for 17 more minutes. Then she picked up her own phone and texted the one person she needed. "I need you to come over." Nora's reply came in 3 seconds. "When now?" "If you can, 5 seconds. Give me 45. Claire got up. She showered. She put on the softest clothes she owned, the gray sweatpants, the loose cream sweater that had become her uniform in these final weeks of pregnancy. She went downstairs and made herself decaf and sat at the kitchen table with both hands wrapped around the mug. She looked at the place on the counter where his phone had been. She looked at the microwave clock. She breathed. She waited. Nora arrived at 7:20 with a paper bag from the bakery 3 blocks away. She came through the door, took one look at Claire's face, and set the bag down without saying hello. "Okay," she said. "What happened?" 13 years of friendship. Nora had a precise radar for the quality of Claire's silences. She always had. "Sit down," Claire said. Nora sat, and Claire told her. She told it the way you read a police report. Flat, sequential. The voicemail, the voice, young, light, breathless. The contacts saved as they are, the specific words. "You know where to find me. You always do." The way he had come back upstairs for his phone. The way he had touched her ankle. The blue anniversary tie. When she finished, Nora was quiet. Then she said, "How long do you think it's been going on?" Not, "Are you sure?" Not, "Maybe it's nothing." Not, "Could it be a work thing?" Those were the responses of people who hadn't been paying attention. Nora had been paying attention. Claire looked at her carefully. "You thought something was wrong before this." It wasn't a question. Nora was quiet one beat too long. "Nora, I wasn't sure," Nora said. "I didn't want to say something and be wrong. And hurt you over nothing." She stopped. "Last spring you mentioned he was traveling more. And there was that work dinner in July you weren't invited to. And I had a feeling, but I didn't have a reason. And I know how much you hate it when someone gives you a feeling instead of a reason." Claire nodded slowly. "You should have told me." "I know. Even without the reason." "I know, Claire. I know." They sat with that. Outside, the rain came harder. It hit the skylight above the kitchen table. That sound should have been comforting. Claire pulled apart a piece of croissant. She didn't eat it. "The thing is," she said quietly, "I think I knew too." Nora looked up. "Not in a way I could say out loud. Not in words." Claire looked at her own hands. "There was a night in August we were watching TV. He got a text and he put the phone face down. I noticed. I thought, that's strange. He doesn't usually do that. And then I thought, don't be paranoid. And then I went back to watching TV." She paused. "I chose not to know," she said. "That is not the same thing as knowing," Nora said, "isn't it?" "No." Nora said it firmly. "Trusting your husband is what you're supposed to be able to do. That's not naivety. That's a basic requirement of marriage." Claire appreciated that. She filed it away. "What are you going to do?" Nora asked. "I don't know yet," Claire said. "I'm not going to confront him tonight.
Okay.
I need to know more first. I need to know how long, and whether it was truly one night or whether that's just what he'll say." She looked up. "There's a real difference between those two things. What do you need from me right now?" Claire looked at her. "Just sit here for a while. I can do that." She did. They talked about other things for an hour. Nora's restaurant. Problem with a wine supplier. The new menu. The way normal conversation can make you feel human again when you've been feeling like an abstraction. At 10 o'clock, Claire's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen. A text from Derek. "Thinking about you. Love you." She stared at it for a long time. She didn't answer. She spent those 3 days moving through the house the way you move through deep water. Slow, deliberate. Everything slightly heavier than usual. She cleaned things that didn't need cleaning. She reorganized the bookshelves in the spare room, alphabetically, and then by color, and then back to alphabetically. She stood in the doorway of the nursery for long stretches of time, looking at the pale sage walls, the white crib, the small dresser with its duck-printed onesies folded in careful squares. She thought, what does this room mean now? She didn't cry. She wasn't ready to cry. Crying felt like a conclusion, and she hadn't reached a conclusion. She was still in the middle of gathering information, which was where you had to be before you could decide anything. She thought like an event coordinator. That was her training. Here are the moving parts. Here are the things I know. Here are the things I do not yet know. She knew R had left a voicemail. She knew the voice was young. The words were intimate. The contact was saved as initials only. She knew AR had said he told her to stop calling, meaning there had been contact he was trying to end or claiming to end. She did not yet know how long, how serious, whether it was over, whether one night was the truth or the beginning of many lies. On the second day, she opened her laptop. She typed into the search bar, "How do I know if my husband is having an affair?" The results came up immediately. 15 signs, 20 red flags. What to do if you suspect. She looked at them for a long moment. Then she closed the laptop. She already knew she didn't need a list. What she needed was the full picture before she walked into a room and changed everything. Derek came home at 7 each evening. She made dinner. She set the table. They ate together the way they always had, and she asked about his day, and he told her, and he asked about hers, and she said, quiet day, tired, watched some TV. He talked about the Harmon account, the difficult client, the spreadsheet that kept corrupting. She listened and asked the right questions and passed the bread. He said, "You sure you're feeling okay? You seem quiet." "Just tired," she said. "You should rest more. Take care of yourself." She nodded. She looked at her plate. She thought, R, you know where to find me. You always do." That night, after his breathing had slowed and deepened beside her, she picked up her phone and texted Nora. "I need to know if it's more than one night." "How are you going to find out?" She thought about it for a long time. "I'm going to ask him, but not until I know what I'll do with the answer." A pause. "Then you're terrifying, you know that?" She put the phone down. She lay in the dark listening to him breathe. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just finally paying attention. On the third day, she found the emails. She wasn't proud of the method. He had left his laptop open on the kitchen table while he was in the shower. She sat down and typed 2 letters into the search bar of his email. AR Amber Ross. The results loaded. 47 emails. The first was dated February 14th, Valentine's Day. She had been 8 weeks pregnant on February 14th. She had been throwing up every morning, sometimes twice. He had brought her pink tulips, not roses. He'd remembered she said roses were obvious, and he had made her soup, and he had rubbed small circles on her back while she sat on the bathroom floor. That had been February 14th, the same day as the first email. She sat very still. She did not read all 47. She read enough. It was not one night, it was 8 months. 8 months of emails, of meetings, of "I can't stop thinking about you and I know this is wrong," and in one email from March, a message from Amber that said, "Does she suspect?" And Derek's reply, "No, she trusts me." Claire read those 4 words 3 times. "She trusts me," said plainly, used as a strategy, offered as reassurance to another woman. She closed the laptop. She stood up. She walked to the kitchen sink. She turned on the cold water. She ran both wrists under it, a thing her mother had taught her at 14, when the panic used to come before big tests. Cold water on the wrists. It grounds you. It brings you back to your body. It worked then. It worked now. She turned off the water. She dried her hands on the dish towel. She walked upstairs. She stood in the bathroom doorway. The shower curtain was still closed. His silhouette moved behind the frosted plastic. She said, "Derek." The water kept running. She said it again, steadier, "Derek." "Yeah?" His voice was easy, casual. "Amber Ross," she said. The water stopped. A silence that lasted exactly long enough to be a confession. Then the curtain moved. He looked at her from around the edge. Water dripping from his hair. His face doing something she had never seen before, a rapid internal recalibration, like a computer receiving a command it wasn't designed for. "Claire, 47 emails," she said. "Since February, Valentine's Day." He stepped out, wrapped the towel. He was not looking directly at her. He was looking just to the left of her face. "I can explain," he said. "Okay, it's not what it looks like." "Okay," she said again. He ran a hand through his wet hair. "It was one night," he said. "It got out of hand. But it was only one night, physically. And then it was 47 emails." She said. He stopped. "She trusts me," Claire said. "You wrote that to her in March. I just want you to know that I read it." He opened his mouth. No sound came out. She looked at him steadily. She thought, "I know your face. I know every expression you make. I have never seen this one before, and I understand now that I have never seen it because I never needed to." She said, "Don't lie to me again. One decent thing. Right now. Just don't lie to me again." Derek sat on the edge of the bathtub. He put his elbows on his knees. He looked at the tile floor. It was more than one night, he said. I know, I'm sorry. She nodded, just once. Then she turned and walked back downstairs. She made herself tea. She sat at the table. She drank it slowly, one measured sip at a time. She was not going to fall apart in this kitchen. She was not going to fall apart anywhere in this house. There were duck-printed onesies folded in a drawer upstairs. There was a name they had chosen together, Lily. That name was going to need her to stay standing. Derek came down eventually. He was dressed. He sat across from her. He looked genuinely wrecked, not performed, not strategic. Actually wrecked. She noted it. She didn't know yet what to do with it. How long have you known? He asked. 3 days. He shook his head slowly. You've known for 3 days. I needed to understand what I was dealing with, Claire. Please, yell at me. Say something. She looked at him across the table they had chosen together on a rainy Saturday in Charlottesville. She remembered that day. They had laughed about something at lunch. She couldn't remember what anymore. How long did it actually last? She said. It's over. I ended it last month. She did the math without meaning to. Last month was September. The baby was due in December. He had started this in February. He had ended it in September. 7 months. You started it when I was pregnant, she said. He looked like she had hit him in the chest. She supposed she had. I know, he said. I know how bad that is. Do you? Because I want to make sure you understand exactly what happened. I was pregnant with your daughter. I was sick every morning. I was scared and I needed you. And you were. She stopped. She pressed her palm flat on the table, steadied herself. You were sending emails. He had nothing to say. He should have had nothing. Is it over? She asked. Yes, I swear to you. Does she know it's over? A hesitation. Small but real. I told her it was, he said. That's not what I asked. He looked at his hands. I don't know what she believes. She nodded. Okay. Okay. What does okay mean? It means I heard you. She met his eyes. I'm not making any decisions tonight. I'm not making decisions in the next few days. I am 34 weeks pregnant, and my first priority is this baby and her health and mine. She held his gaze. But Derek, I need you to understand something. He waited. I am not the same woman who woke up 3 days ago, she said. Something changed that night, and it is not going to change back. She stood up. She rinsed her mug, set it in the drying rack. I'm going to sleep in the guest room for now, she said. He didn't argue. She didn't look back. She lay in the guest room that night, and the memories came like water through a broken seal. She hadn't invited them. They came February. Valentine's Day, the pink tulips in the blue vase. Him rubbing her back on the bathroom floor while she was sick, his voice, low and steady, saying, It's okay. I've got you. You're okay. She had thought, this is what a good marriage feels like. This specific moment, this man on the bathroom floor with me, the same day he sent the first email. She pressed her hand to her forehead in the dark. She thought about March. She had felt better by March. The nausea had started to lift. She had been happy in March. She had started buying things for the nursery. She had sent him photos of crib options while he was at work, and he had responded with thumbs-up emojis, and she had taken that as enthusiasm. In March, he had written, She trusts me. She'd been happy in March. She thought about April. They had gone to her OB appointment together, the one where they found out it was a girl. They had stood together in that small room looking at the ultrasound screen, and she had reached for his hand without thinking, and he had held it, and they had both been quietly overwhelmed in the way of new parents seeing the reality of the thing for the first time. She had cried. Small tears, grateful tears. He had held her hand. What had been happening in April? She tried to count. The emails had started in February. She had read enough of them to know they were ongoing in March. April, she looked at the ceiling and tried to think about what she had not seen in April, what she had explained away. There was a night in April. She remembered it now with a clarity that felt like punishment. He had come home late, not unusually late, but late enough that dinner had gone cold. He had apologized. Harmon account, he said. Client dinner. He had been quiet through most of the meal, and she had assumed work stress, and she had not pressed him because she had been tired and because she trusted him. She had assumed, she had trusted. I was so careful, she thought. I built everything so carefully. I chose my husband carefully. I married slowly, not quickly. I waited until I was sure. 4 years of dating. 5 years of marriage. I was not reckless. I was not foolish, and it still happened. She lay there for a long time, not sleeping. There was a particular kind of grief in this. She recognized it now that she was inside it. Not just the grief of the thing itself, but the grief of the memories. Every good memory now had a shadow attached to it. That night in March when they had fallen asleep on the couch watching a movie, what had he been thinking? That Saturday in June when they had spent the whole morning in bed being easy and warm with each other, had he been relieved to come back to her? Or had he already been comparing? She had been present for all of it. She was not sure he had. She turned onto her side. The baby pressed against her ribs. She moved her hand to where the pressing was. We're okay, she said quietly. You and me, we're okay. She believed it. She was surprised to believe it, given everything, but she did. She called her mother in the morning. She had been putting it off. Not because Gwen was cruel or cold, her mother was the opposite of those things. But because once she told her mother, it became real in a different way. It left the private space of her own processing and entered the world of other people's knowing. Once Gwen knew, Claire could not unknow it either. She called from the car, parked in the driveway. She needed the small enclosed space of it. She needed to not be in the house for this. It rang twice. "Hey, sweetheart, I was just thinking about you. How's my granddaughter today?" Claire said. "Mom, I need to tell you something." A pause. Just a breath. "Go ahead, honey. I'm right here," she told her. She used the same flat sequential method she had used with Nora. Voicemail, emails. 47, February 14th, 8 months. She trusts me. The confrontation, the guest room. She laid it out like a file. When she finished, Gwen was quiet. Then she said, "Are you somewhere safe? I'm in the driveway. Is he there?" "He's at work." "Okay." A breath. "I'm going to ask you one question and I need you to answer me honestly." "Okay. How are you really?" Claire opened her mouth. She had the answer ready. She had been preparing the answer. "Fine," she was going to say. "Managing, taking it one day at a time." But that was not the true answer. The true answer was sitting right below the surface of the managed answer, and the moment her mother asked, it breached. She started to cry, not quietly, not the restrained, dignified kind, the other kind. The kind that comes from somewhere below your throat, the kind that has been stored under pressure for too long. Her mother's voice came through immediately, low and steady. I know, that's right, let it go. I'm right here, I am not going anywhere," she cried for a long time. Lily moved once, hard, while she was crying a sharp kick that felt like reassurance, as if to say, still here, still here. "I know," Claire said through the crying, to her mother, to her daughter, to both of them. When it finally stopped, she felt emptied, like a room after a storm, cleaner, colder, more honest about its own dimensions. "Mom," she said, "I'm here. I don't know what to do. You don't have to know right now. She comes in 8 weeks. And your one job right now is to be healthy and calm. Everything else comes after. He wants to fix it. He keeps trying to talk. He left a note under the guest room door this morning." "What did it say?" "Please let me explain." Gwen was quiet a moment. "What do you want to do?" "I don't know yet. I know I'm not ready to leave or stay. I'm in the middle of something I don't have a name for yet." "That's okay. You can be in the middle. You're not going to tell me to leave him. It is not my decision. But you want to." A pause that lasted long enough to be honest. "I want to come get you and bring you home, and put you to bed in your old room and feed you your grandmother's soup until you're better. That's what I want. A beat. But knowing you, Claire Marie, you're going to have to come to your own conclusion in your own time. And whatever that conclusion is, I will support it with everything I have." Claire leaned her head against the car window. The glass was cold. Outside, the neighborhood went on with itself. A man walked a dog. Leaves moved across the driveway. A delivery truck rumbled past. The world was completely indifferent to her. She found that almost comforting. "Come stay," Gwen said, "even a few days. You shouldn't be alone in that house. I'll think about it." "Think faster." A small laugh escaped her, the first one in 3 days. It surprised her enough that she laughed again, just at the surprise of it. "Okay, Mom. Good. I love you. I love you too." She sat in the car for another 10 minutes after the call ended. Then she went inside and stood at the kitchen counter and ate half a peanut butter sandwich standing up because she wasn't hungry but she had a daughter to feed. She ate the second half too. She went through the photo albums that afternoon, not on purpose. She was reorganizing the bottom shelf of the bookcase in the living room, the one she had already reorganized twice this week, and the albums were stacked there, chronological, going back to the early years of their relationship. She sat down on the floor with the first one. There they were, 28 and 26, in the early photographs. A hiking trip, a birthday party at someone's apartment, Christmas at her mother's house. His face was open and bright in those early pictures. Hers too. Two people who had no idea they were walking toward a Tuesday night in October. She turned the pages slowly. The wedding album was a separate volume, larger. She didn't open it. She sat with the regular albums, the everyday photographs, and looked at the documented evidence of a life she had believed in completely. And she did something she had not expected to do. She allowed herself to grieve it. Not the marriage, she hadn't decided about the marriage yet, but the uncomplicated belief, the clean trust, the version of her life where she did not know what she now knew. That was gone. That specific thing was gone, and it was not coming back. She sat on the floor of the living room with the albums in her lap, and she let herself feel that. The specific ache of something you have to stop pretending is still intact. The baby moved. "Yeah," she said, "I know." She put the albums back. She stood up slowly, using the bookshelf for support. She went to the kitchen and made herself a cup of decaf and stood at the window and watched the backyard while she drank it. She thought, "I am grieving a version of my life that may not have been real." She thought, "But the parts I built are still real. My daughter is real. My mother is real. This cup in my hands is real." She thought, "I am going to need to figure out which parts of this were true and which parts were something else." She thought, "I have time. I have a little time." The rain started again outside the window. She watched it hit the backyard. She finished her coffee. She picked up her phone. She had not answered Derek's text from the day before. She was not going to answer it today either, but she was going to send one of her own. She typed, "I need a few days. Please don't push." He replied in less than a minute. "Okay, I'm here. I love you." She put the phone face down on the counter. She started thinking about what she needed to know before she would be ready to have the real conversation. She needed to know, was it truly over? She needed to know, was the fear he had felt, whatever fear had driven him to this, something he had examined, or something he was just sorry about because he had been caught? She needed to know, who was she dealing with? The man she had married, imperfect and afraid, who had made a catastrophic choice, or someone she had never actually known? Those were questions only time and watching would answer. She could do that. She had always been better at watching than she gave herself credit for. Owen called on a Saturday morning. She almost didn't pick up. She saw his name on the screen and thought, not yet. But then she thought, better me get Derek's version of this from him than wonder what version Derek has given him. "Hi, Owen." "Claire." His voice was heavier than his usual register. "I heard."
From Derek. I don't know what to say. I'm sorry it doesn't feel like it covers it.
"No," she said. "It doesn't. I want you to know that I think what he did was he stopped, regrouped. I think he's an idiot. I think he had the best thing in his life, and I don't have a word for what he did." She felt something loosen slightly. Owen had always been the steadier of the two brothers, more forthright, less performed. He had been Derek's best man, and he had given a speech that made people cry with its sincere assessment of who Derek was at his best. She wondered now what Owen had seen that she hadn't. "Can I tell you something?" Owen said. "You can tell me to mind my own business." "Go ahead." "I think Derek has been trying to say something to you for over a year, something he doesn't know how to say. And instead of saying it, a pause. He's a coward, Claire, in the specific way that scared men are cowards. He did the worst possible version of saying, 'I'm not okay.'" She looked out the window. What was he scared of? Being his father. The words landed with weight. "He said things to me, small things, over the past 18 months, Owen continued. About the pregnancy, about being a father. I think he was terrified in a way he couldn't admit, even to himself, because admitting it felt too much like repeating history. She knew the history. Derek's father had left when Derek was 9. An ordinary morning, apparently. He had just not come back from work one day. Derek had never talked about it much. She had thought that meant he had processed it. She understood now that maybe it meant the opposite. "He should have talked to me," she said. "I know. I could have handled it. I would have helped him. I know that too. He knew it too, I think. He just..." Owen exhaled. He chose the thing that felt easier in the moment, which is the thing men do when they're terrified. "I'm not making excuses. I'm explaining. There's a difference." "There is," she agreed. "I should have said something to you," he said, when I noticed he was struggling. "I kept thinking it would sort itself out. I was wrong. A lot of people were wrong about that," she said quietly. He didn't argue. After she hung up, she stood in the hallway for a long time. She thought about what Owen had said. Scared. Terrified of becoming his father. Running from a fear he couldn't name by finding somewhere the fear didn't exist yet. She understood it. She hated that she understood it, because understanding it didn't change what it had cost her. Understanding why someone drives into your house at 90 miles an hour doesn't fix the house. But it did answer a question she had been holding. She had been asking, who is he? The man I knew or someone I never knew? The answer, it seemed, was both. He was a man she had known well who had hidden something from himself as much as from her, who had run from a fear into the arms of someone uncomplicated, who had sent 47 emails and written "she trusts me" and brought her pink tulips on Valentine's Day. Both things. At the same time, she thought, that is the most painful kind of betrayal. The kind done by someone who is also genuinely the person you believe them to be. She sat down on the bottom stair. She put her face in her hands. She sat there for a while. The baby pushed against her ribs. She moved her hand there. "He loves you," she said softly. "I need you to know that's true. Whatever else is true, that part is." She meant it. She drove to the park that afternoon. She had been walking the duck pond path since August, her prenatal route, 2 loops, slow and deliberate. She walked it now in November. The trees fully bare, the pond dark, the path crunchy with leaves. She went slowly. The baby's weight had shifted lower in the last 2 weeks. Every step was negotiated. A woman with a small terrier stopped to smile at her belly. "How long?" 6 weeks, give or take," Claire said. "Oh, you're almost there. The hard part's almost over." Claire smiled. She didn't say, "I'm not sure that's true." She walked another loop after the woman left. The park was mostly empty. A man jogged past. 2 kids on bikes, bundled in orange and yellow jackets. The bare trees against the gray November sky had a particular honesty to them, stripped of everything decorative, standing in their actual structure. She thought, that's what I'm doing. Stripping this down to what it actually is. She thought he was scared and he chose someone easier. And now I have to decide what I am. She pressed her hand to the side of her belly. Lily rolled slowly in response. "Hey," Claire said quietly, We're going to be okay. I don't have the exact map yet, but I know the direction. She believed it. Standing alone on a path in November, she actually believed it. That surprised her. She had expected to feel only grief and rage, and those were there. She wasn't pretending they weren't. But underneath them, steadier, was something that felt like the ground, like the actual solid ground of herself. She had always been there. She had been present and capable and real the whole time. That had not been taken from her. She walked the second loop. She went home. 3 weeks after the voicemail, she sat Derek down. She had planned it deliberately. She had spent those 3 weeks moving through the house, being civil, watching. Watching him the way you watch a patient in a waiting room, not with suspicion exactly, but with attention, taking in information. What she had observed, he was leaving work earlier. He was quieter at dinner. He was not performing contrition, he was simply subdued in a way that felt genuine. He had stopped trying to explain. He had asked 3 times if she wanted to go to a couples counselor. She said she'd think about it. She was still thinking about it. But first she needed this. She made tea for both of them. She sat at the kitchen table. He sat across from her. I want to have the real conversation now, she said. Not the apology version, the actual one. What happened? Why? He nodded. He looked like a man who had been dreading and needing this in equal measure. I got scared, he said. Owen told me you'd say that. He looked up. He wasn't defending you, she said. He was explaining you. Tell me anyway. Derek looked at his hands. He started talking in a way she had rarely heard him talk, not smooth, not practiced. Halting, real. He talked about the day they had found out she was pregnant. He said he had been happy. He wanted her to know that. Genuinely happy. And then he said, he stopped, he tried again, and then the happy shifted into something I didn't have a name for. It wasn't about you. It wasn't about her specifically. He looked at the table. It was about my father. Explain that to me, she said. I spent my whole life telling myself I was different, that I had fixed it somehow. Being good at my job, building something real, marrying he stopped. His voice changed. I thought I had outrun it. And then you told me you were pregnant, and I was happy. And then 3 weeks later, I woke up one morning and I thought, what if I can't do this? What if I'm exactly like him? What if Lily is 9 years old someday? And he stopped. She let the silence sit where it was. I should have talked to you, he said. I know that. Instead, I found someone who didn't need anything from you, she said. He winced. Yes, someone who didn't know about your father or your fears or your failures. Someone who just thought you were, yes, he said, quietly. Yes. She looked at him. She thought, I understand this. I genuinely understand the architecture of it. A frightened man finding somewhere the fear hasn't reached yet. She thought, understanding it doesn't fix anything. But it answers a question. Why didn't you tell me you were scared, she said. Because you needed me to be solid. You were sick. You were going through everything pregnancy puts you through. I didn't want to be another thing you had to manage. She sat very still. I see, she said. I know that sounds. You decided what I needed, she said, without asking me. You decided I couldn't handle your fear on top of my own. And that decision led you somewhere else. He had nothing to say. I needed you, she said. Not the solid version, not the managed version, just you, scared and real. I would have helped you. That is what I do. That is who I am. You know that about me. I know. You chose not to let me. His eyes were wet. She noticed it. She had a complicated feeling about it, not cold, not entirely soft. Something in between. His grief was real. She could see that. Real grief was not the same as absolution. What do you want? He asked. Tell me what you want, Claire. Whatever it is. She thought about that honestly. I want Lily to be born into something stable, she said. I want to get through the next 6 weeks and be fully present for that. And then after she's here, after we're both functional again, I need to figure out what we are. She looked at him. I'm not telling you to leave. I'm not telling you to stay. I'm telling you I don't know yet. He nodded slowly. Is there any part of you that still... He stopped. He couldn't finish it. She knew what he was asking. She looked at him across the table they had chosen together on a rainy Saturday. The man she had married. The frightened boy running from his father's shadow. Both of those people, sitting across from her right now. I don't know that yet either, she said. He nodded again, like it was more than he had expected her to give him. That night she lay in the guest room and thought about identity. She had been someone's daughter for 34 years. Someone's best friend, someone's girlfriend, then fiancée, then wife, someone's future mother. She had understood herself inside those relationships. She had been clear about who she was inside them. She thought, who am I when I'm only Claire? She thought, I'm going to have to find out. The thought was frightening, and also underneath the fear, something that felt like opening, like a window she hadn't known was closed. She lay in the dark guest room with her hand on her belly. She thought, I am going to be someone's mother very soon. She thought, the woman that child deserves to have as a mother is the woman who knows who she is, not the woman who stayed because it was easier, not the woman who left because she was angry, the woman who made a true decision for real reasons. She closed her eyes. She started very slowly to figure out what a true decision would look like. The anger came on a Wednesday morning in November. She had been expecting grief and confusion and fear. She had been living in those. What she had not anticipated was the specific color and heat of this. She was standing at the bathroom mirror, getting ready for a prenatal appointment, and she looked at her face, the circles under her eyes, the pallor of someone who had not been sleeping well for a month, and she thought, he did this while I was growing his child. The thought was simple and complete. He sat at his desk and sent those emails while my body was doing the most demanding thing it has ever done, while I was nauseated, while I was exhausted, while I was afraid about labor and the epidural and whether I would be a good mother, while I was already carrying more than I had ever carried. He was also somewhere else. She gripped the edge of the bathroom sink. She thought I deserved better than this. She thought it as a statement, not a plea, not I wish I had deserved better, not maybe someday I'll feel like I deserve better. I deserved better than this. The anger was clean. She had not expected that. She had expected rage to be messy and destructive. This was different. This was precise, like a tool, like something she could actually use. She finished getting ready. She drove herself to the appointment. She sat in the waiting room of Dr. Sims's office, surrounded by other pregnant women, and she thought, every single person in this room deserves someone who shows up. Dr. Patricia Sims had been her OB since the beginning. She was a calm, unhurried woman who had a gift for making you feel that whatever you were worried about was worth taking seriously. She did the routine checks, blood pressure, baby's position, heart rate strong, regular, exactly as it should be. You seem tense, Dr. Sims said, not as a criticism, as an observation. Things have been complicated at home, Claire said. Dr. Sims paused in what she was doing. Are you safe? She asked directly. Yes, Claire said. Not that kind of complicated. Dr. Sims nodded. Stress affects the body. Try to rest. Try to eat. Your daughter is healthy and you need to stay that way. I know, Claire said. She drove home through the November streets and thought, Lily is healthy. Whatever else is happening, my daughter is healthy and she is almost here. That was not nothing. That was enormous. She called Nora that evening. The anger showed up, she said when Nora picked up. Tell me everything. It's not wild. It's specific. He did this while I was pregnant, while I was the most vulnerable I have ever been, while I needed him most. And she stopped.
I'm not crazy. I know what happened, and I deserve better.
You did, Nora said simply. Say it again. You deserve better than this, Claire. You deserved a husband who came to you when he was scared instead of running from you. You deserved honesty. You deserved the marriage you thought you had. She let those words in. All of them. The thing about the anger, she said, is that it feels like information. Like it's telling me something true about what I'm worth. Because it is, Nora said. That's exactly what it is. She went to bed that night thinking about worth. She had spent a month in grief. Shock, denial, grief. And now, finally, here was the anger. And the anger, as it turned out, was not the enemy. The anger was the part of her that had been paying attention to what she deserved all along. She thought, I am not crazy. I know what I saw. She thought starting over feels impossible. But staying in something broken feels worse. She thought, I need to figure out which one of those is true for me. She found the journal on a Thursday. Not Derek's journal, he didn't keep one. Her own. One she had started when she first got pregnant, documenting the weeks, the feelings, the small and significant things. She had not opened it in 2 months. She opened it now. The entries from February were full of nausea and excitement and fear and love. She had written, on February 14th, Derek brought tulips, the pink ones. He sat with me on the bathroom floor for 40 minutes. I thought, this is what a real marriage looks like. February 14th, the first email. She closed the journal. She sat at the desk in the guest room with the closed journal in her lap, and she felt the full weight of the distance between what she had believed was happening and what had actually been happening. She sat with it until the weight became familiar. And then she thought, I built something real. I had real love in my life. That part was not a lie. My part of it was not a lie. And then she thought I deserved to build something real again. Maybe with him, maybe without him, but real. She put the journal in the drawer. She stood up. She went downstairs and made dinner and ate it at the kitchen table and watched the news and went to bed. She was still standing. Lily Eleanor Whitfield arrived on a Monday morning in late November. 6 pounds, 11 ounces. A full head of dark hair that surprised the whole room. She arrived the way certain people announce themselves suddenly, decisively, without apology. Claire held her for the first time in the delivery room and thought, oh, it's you. She had heard about this feeling. The overwhelming rush. The tidal love. She had expected something enormous and loud and cinematic. What she felt was recognition, like meeting someone she had known for a very long time in a different form. Hi, she said so quietly that only Lily could have heard it. Hi, I've been waiting for you. Lily looked up at her with the unfocused, ancient eyes of the newborn. She had no context yet. She had no knowledge of voicemails or guest rooms, or the careful, painful work of the last several weeks. She was simply and entirely here. Derek had been there for all of it. 21 hours. He had not left. He had held her hand through the long, slow middle hours when nothing seemed to be moving and everything hurt. He had not flinched. He had been present in a way that she had needed and had not known how to ask for. She had not asked him to leave. She had not known how to take that from Lily. So she had let him be there, and he had been there fully in a way that broke her heart a little because this was what she had needed, this version, this man who showed up. She watched him look at Lily for the first time. His face did something she had never seen it do. It opened, completely. All the polished ease and social management dissolved. He was standing there with no armor at all, looking at his daughter, and he looked like a 9-year-old boy standing in a house that had just become too big, scared, open, full of love. Both things. Hey, he said softly to Lily, just to Lily. I've been looking forward to meeting you. Claire looked away. She looked at the window. Winter sky, bare maple. She thought, this is the most complicated I have ever felt in my life. She thought, she deserves him. She deserves him to be her father. She thought, what that means for me I still don't know. She hit her lowest point at 3 in the morning on Lily's 4th night home. Everyone talks about the exhaustion. Nobody fully explains the specific 3 a.m. Darkness when the baby has been crying for an hour and you cannot figure out why, and your body is still recovering from labor, and the rest of the world is asleep, and you are completely alone with your inadequacy. She sat in the glider with Lily against her chest, and she was so tired she could not think linearly. She thought in fragments. 47 emails. She trusts me. The blue anniversary tie. The journal entry, February 14th. I thought this is what a real marriage looks like. She pressed her face against the top of Lily's head. The smell of her, that particular, extraordinary smell, was the only thing that felt solid. She thought, I don't know who I am anymore. She thought, I don't know if I made the right choice letting him stay. She thought, I don't know how to rebuild a life and also keep this small person alive when I haven't slept in 4 days. She thought, I might be breaking. She sat in the dark glider in the nursery and she let herself feel that. She did not rush past it. She did not perform okayness for herself. She sat in the most broken part of it. And then something happened that she would think about for a long time afterward. Lily stopped crying. Not gradually, not with coaxing. She just stopped. She looked up at Claire with those dark, unfocused eyes. And Claire thought, I am not alone in this room. She thought, I have been alone in harder places than this, and I have always found the next thing to do. She thought, I am the person this child needs. Not a perfect person, not an unbroken person. Just me. Present and real. She thought, that is enough. She leaned her head back in the glider. The baby breathed against her chest. She breathed too. She stayed until morning. Her mother arrived 2 days later. She drove 5 hours from Virginia with 3 bags of groceries and the energy of a woman on a deliberate mission. She came in, kissed Claire's forehead, looked at Lily for 30 seconds, and said, you look exhausted. Go sleep, I have her. Claire slept for 4 hours. She woke to the smell of her childhood, the specific soup her mother made, the one with the bay leaf and the barley. She walked to the kitchen doorway. Gwen was at the stove. Lily was in the bouncy chair beside her, staring at the ceiling light. Her mother turned around. She looked at Claire the way she always had, directly, without flinching. 34 years of that look. Derek's at the store, Gwen said. I sent him for diapers, made him take his time. Mom, I needed 5 minutes. She turned back to the stove. Sit. Claire sat at the table. The coffee mug was already there. Of course it was. Gwen sat across from her. Are you going to leave him? She asked. Still figuring that out. What's in the way? I don't actually hate him, Claire said. I wish I did. It would be simpler. Not hating someone isn't a reason to stay. I know. Loving someone who hurt you isn't a reason to stay either. I know that too. Do you? Claire looked at her mother. I think what's in the way, she said slowly, is that I need to be sure not about him, about me, about what I want my life to look like. She paused. I've been someone's person my whole life. Someone's daughter, someone's best friend, someone's wife. I have been defined by who I belong to. She looked at her hands. I think whatever comes next, I need to belong to myself first. Gwen was quiet for a moment. That's not a small thing, she said finally. No, Claire said, it's not. Lily made a sound from the bouncy chair, a small, declarative sound, as if to agree. She called Thomas Calloway's office the 2nd week of January. Nora had given her the name. Not showy, Nora had said. Not dramatic. He'll tell you exactly what you're looking at and he'll make sure you get what you deserve. His office was on the 4th floor downtown. Small, tidy, a window overlooking the street. He was compact and deliberate, with reading glasses he took on and off repeatedly. He reminded her of a teacher she had loved at 14, the one who had told her she had a precise mind. She liked him immediately. Tell me what you're looking for, he said. Information first, she said. Before I decide anything, he nodded. That's the right starting place. She told him the facts. 5 years married, 1 daughter, 6 weeks old. He was the primary earner. She had left her career when they relocated 2 years ago. She currently had no income. The house was jointly owned. His retirement accounts were substantial, she knew the numbers, because she managed the household finances. He had never hidden money from her. Whatever else he had hidden, not money. Thomas listened. He made notes. He asked precise questions. Then he told her what the law said she was entitled to. He was clear and fair and did not editorialize. "What would I need to do to start this?" she asked. He set down his pen. "Start by being certain," he said. "Not about the marriage, about what you want your life to look like on the other side of this process. Divorce is long. It asks more of you than you'll expect. You should be sure before you start it." He paused. "You sound like someone who is nearly sure." "Nearly," she agreed. "Take the time you need. Come back when you're ready." She went home that afternoon and sat in the nursery while Lily slept. She sat in the glider. She rocked slowly. She listened to her daughter breathe. She thought about the word, certain. She watched Derek carefully in those weeks. He was present. He started therapy. He had told her this without making it a bid for credit. Just information. He was working on things. He had stopped pleading. He had stopped performing. He simply showed up. And still, she could see the future two ways. In one version, they rebuilt it. It was possible. People did that. Owen and her mother had both, in different ways, suggested it was possible. In that version, there was repair and work and the long, slow rebuilding of trust. In the other version, she exhaled. That was the only word for it. In that version, she exhaled. She knew which version she needed. She had known it for a while. She ran into Amber Ross on a January morning. She had not looked for her. She had not gone searching. She had simply walked into a coffee shop near the conference center where she had a meeting, and Amber was there, at a small table by the window, with a coffee and a laptop. Claire knew her immediately. She had seen the photo on the company website months ago. She had looked once and had not gone back. She had memorized the face anyway, the way you memorize something you wish you didn't have to know. Amber looked up. The color left her face so completely that it was almost theatrical. They were both still for a moment. Then Claire walked to her table and said, "I'm Claire." Amber's voice was barely there. "I know." She sat down. She hadn't planned to. She sat because she needed to. She had spent months with Amber Ross as a concept, as an idea, a shadow, a name in an email header. She needed to see her as a person. She needed to take her out of the abstract. "I'm not here to yell at you," Claire said. Amber looked like she was waiting for the but. "I have things I could say. A lot of them." Claire held her gaze steadily. "But mainly I needed to see you. It helps me to see that you're a real person, not a symbol." Amber swallowed. "I'm sorry," she said. "I know that doesn't—" "It doesn't," Claire agreed. "No, it doesn't do anything." She looked at her. "Did you know about the pregnancy?" A pause. I knew you were pregnant." "Yes." Claire nodded. She sat with that for a moment. Let it be true in the room. "I'm not going to call you a monster," she said. "People do harmful things and are still people. I understand that now." She paused. "I just needed to look at you and say, I know what happened. It happened to me, and it was real, and it cost me something I will not get back." Amber's eyes were wet. She pressed her lips together. "He loves her," Amber said quietly. "Lily. He talked about her. I don't know if that makes this worse." "I know he loves her," Claire said. "I know that's true." She stood. She looked at Amber for one last moment. "I hope you figure out what you're worth," she said. "I hope next time you don't look for it in someone else's marriage." She walked out. She sat in her car for 5 minutes. She did not feel victorious. She did not feel vindicated. She felt something that was simpler and more solid than either of those things. She felt complete, like a sentence that had finally found its period. She drove to her phone. She called Thomas Calloway's office. "I'm ready," she said. She signed the papers on a Friday morning in January. She had not told Derek when. She had told him she had an appointment with her attorney. He had sat with that for 3 days and then said very quietly, "Is there anything I can do?" She had said, "Keep showing up for Lily, and I need you to sign them when they come." He had closed his eyes. Then he had nodded. She brought Lily with her to the signing. Her mother had gone back to Virginia. She didn't want to ask Nora not for this. This was hers. She sat in Thomas's office with Lily in her lap and signed each page. Her handwriting was even. She had always had even handwriting. Thomas placed each page carefully after she finished. He did not rush. He treated the whole event with a gravity she appreciated. It deserved gravity. When she signed the last one, she held the pen for a moment. Lily made a small sound, her almost asleep sound, the one that meant she was drifting toward the good rest. Claire pressed her lips to the top of her daughter's head. She thought, "This is the last decision I will make from inside the old version of my life." She thought, "Everything after this is new." She didn't cry. She had expected to, and she didn't. What she felt was not happiness and not grief. It was something more like weather clearing. The specific quality of air after a long rain finally stops. Thomas said, "Are you all right?" She looked at him. Surprisingly, yes. He nodded. He looked like he believed her. She drove home with the windows down even though it was January. The cold air was precise and clean. Lily slept in her car seat, entirely unconcerned with the state of the world. Claire put her hand on the steering wheel and drove. Derek came over that evening. He had rented an apartment 2 miles away, closer to his office. It had taken him 3 weeks to find it and tell her the address. He had offered to leave sooner. She had said, "Wait until Lily is here and we know the schedule." He had waited. He came in and held Lily for half an hour. He sat in the armchair in the living room with her. He made the quiet sounds that fathers make, the low murmuring, the gentle nonsense. Lily seemed to find him interesting. She was at the age now where she was making assessments. She had decided her father was worth looking at. They didn't talk much, Derek and Claire. They didn't need to. There was a new shape to what they were now. It was not comfortable yet. It was not finished. But it was honest. And honesty was a better foundation than almost anything else. Before he left, he stood in the doorway and said, "I'm going to be the father she deserves. I need you to know I understand that's what I owe her." "Good," Claire said. "I'm counting on it." He nodded. She thought he might reach for more, might try to open a door she had closed. He didn't. He had learned in these months when to hold still. "Sunday," he said. "The schedule. Lily's first handoff visit. Sunday," she confirmed. He left. She closed the door. She stood in the hallway and listened to the house. Her house, a different quiet than before. Not the quiet of two people managing the space between them. Her quiet. The house sounding like what it actually was. She went to the kitchen. She made pasta, the kind she liked, with lemon and capers and breadcrumbs. The kind she had never made before because Derek didn't enjoy the flavors. She made it for herself, properly, with care. She put on music she had forgotten about from college, turned it up louder than she would have before. She ate at the kitchen table. She did not think about what she had lost. She thought about what she was becoming. February came quietly, 1 year after the first email. She noticed the date. She marked it in her mind. She let it pass. Lily was 3 months old. She was becoming a person, a specific, definite person with specific opinions. She had decided she loved ceiling fans and was skeptical of hats. She regarded her own hands as endlessly fascinating. She had her father's hair dark, thick, and Claire's gray eyes, and she was the most particular individual Claire had ever met. Claire had gone back to work, part-time first. A contract position with the conference center, downtown event coordination, logistics, the work of making complicated things cohere. It was a good fit. She was good at it. She had always been good at it. She had simply forgotten, in the years of being primarily someone's wife, that this was still true. She was also good, she was discovering, at rebuilding. Not in the grand dramatic way, not all at once. In the small and daily way that rebuilding actually happens, one morning, one decision, one reclaimed thing at a time. She started walking again in February. Long walks, early mornings before Lily's first nap. Through the neighborhood in the cold winter air. She had a neighbor, Laurel, who walked a small gray dog at the same time. They had started walking together the way neighbors do, without formal arrangement, just falling into step. It had happened twice, then 3 times. Then it was simply their rhythm. Laurel was 67. She had lost her husband 4 years ago. She was not sentimental about it. She was matter-of-fact in a way that Claire found deeply comforting. "You seem lighter," Laurel said one morning. "Lighter? Than when I first started seeing you out here. You had a weight." "I had a lot of weight," Claire said. "And now?" She thought about it. "The bare trees, the cold air, the steady rhythm of walking. Now I have a different kind," she said. "Not heavier, more honest." Laurel made a sound of recognition. The sound of someone who has lived enough to know exactly what that distinction means. "My husband and I almost divorced," Laurel said, 12 years in. Claire looked at her. "I didn't know that. Something happened. I'm not going to detail it." She looked ahead on the path. "We went to a counselor. We worked through it. 40 years total." She paused. "I'm not telling you that so you'll think you made the wrong choice. I'm telling you so you know there isn't one right answer. There's only the answer you make and then live." "Did you regret staying?" Claire asked. Laurel was quiet for a moment, careful with it. "Some days early on," she said. "Then less. Then not at all." She glanced at Claire. "You'll have your own version of that accounting, whatever you chose." Claire thought, "I chose honestly. I chose what I could breathe in. I chose the version of my life that let me be most present for my daughter and for myself." She thought, "That is enough. That is genuinely enough." She got the call in March, the conference center. They wanted to offer her a full-time position, senior event coordinator. The number they offered was not what she would have accepted a year ago. A year ago, she would have said thank you and taken whatever they offered because she was out of practice and uncertain of her worth. She said, "I'm glad you think I'd be a good fit. I'd like to discuss the salary." She named a number 15% higher than what they had offered. There was a pause. "Let us talk internally and get back to you," they said. They called back the next morning. They met her number. She accepted. She hung up the phone and stood in the kitchen and thought, "I did not apologize for that number. I said it and I waited and I got it." She thought, "A year ago I would not have done that." She thought, "That is one small thing." But small things compound. She reorganized the main bedroom in March. She had been sleeping in what had technically been the master bedroom since Derek moved out, but she had not yet made it hers. His side of the closet still had the ghost of his presence cleared out, but not replaced. The dresser still had a container of his cufflinks she kept meaning to return. She returned the cufflinks. She moved the bed. Not to a different room, just to a different wall, so that the window was on her left instead of her right when she woke up, so that the first thing she saw in the morning was sky instead of the door. She bought new pillows, her pillows, the ones she liked slightly firmer than what they had always kept, because she had always accommodated his preference on pillows. A small thing, completely real. She hung a photograph she had always loved on the wall above the dresser one of her mother's garden in Virginia, taken years ago, full of light and color. She had kept it in a drawer because it hadn't matched the room's aesthetic. She put it up now. She stood back and looked at the room. It looked like somewhere she lived. She went to get Lily from her nap. She brought her back into the bedroom and sat on the bed with her in the afternoon light and said, "This is our house. Yours and mine. How does it look?" Lily looked at the ceiling. "Yeah," Claire said, "the light is good. Thomas Calloway sent a bottle of wine when the divorce was finalized. A good bottle, with a card that said simply, 'Wishing you clarity and forward motion.'" She thought those were exactly the right words. She put the card on the refrigerator beside the crayon house with the smiling sun. Clarity, forward motion. Yes. She called her mother to tell her the divorce was final. Gwen said, "How do you feel?" Claire thought about it. She wanted to answer honestly. "Free," she said. Not like released from something terrible. More like stop, try it again. Like the window is open, and the air outside it is good. "That's poetry," her mother said. "I've been reading more." "Since when?" "Since I have evenings to myself." A pause. "Since I have an actual self to have evenings." Her mother made a sound, not a word. A sound that carried satisfaction and grief and love in approximately equal measure. The particular sound of a mother who has watched her child walk through something hard and come out the other side. "Evenings to yourself," Gwen said quietly. "When is the last time you had those?" Claire thought about it seriously. "I'm not sure I ever did," she said. "Well then," Gwen said. "Well then," Claire agreed. 1 year after the voicemail, Lily sat up for the first time. She was on the blanket in the middle of the living room floor. The blanket Claire's mother had mailed from Virginia, the one Gwen herself had used with Claire as a baby. No explanation attached, just the blanket and a note that said, "You'll know when." Lily sat up. She teetered, grabbed a fistful of blanket, steadied herself. Her eyes went wide with the absolute astonishment of discovering something you didn't know you were capable of. She held it. "Oh," Claire said from the floor beside her. "Look at you." Lily looked at her, considered this response. Then, with the absolute solemn dignity of the very young, she toppled sideways. She landed on the blanket. She seemed to assess the situation and find it acceptable. She lay there, studying the ceiling with great interest. Claire laughed. She sat on the floor of her living room and laughed real and full, not performed, not shaped for any audience. The kind that comes from somewhere genuinely surprised by joy. Lily regarded her with ancient calm. "Your father is coming Sunday," Claire told her. "He's going to completely lose his mind about the sitting up. He's going to send 8 texts to his brother. You should prepare yourself." She was right about this. She knew she was right about this. She had watched Derek become, in these months since the separation, something she had not been prepared for. A genuinely good father. Not a performance, a real one. Showing up, being present, doing the consistent, unglamorous work of being someone's parent. She was honest enough to recognize it. It changed nothing about what they were to each other. But it changed something about what they could be as parents. And that mattered. She had a conversation with Laurel on a morning walk in April. They were going through the park, the duck pond, the path she had walked pregnant and slow so many months ago, now walked with energy and purpose. She had mentioned something about feeling behind, about being 34 and starting over. Laurel stopped walking. She turned and looked at Claire with the particular directness of someone who has stopped worrying about being polite. "I've noticed that women your age think starting over means you failed," she said, as if a life only counts if it proceeds without interruption. She shook her head. "What starting over actually means is that you had the courage to stop, to say, 'This is not right, and I will not spend another year of my life inside something untrue.'" "Some people stay inside it," Claire said. "Some people stay for 30 years, Laurel agreed. "That is their choice, and I don't judge it." "But yet," she gestured at Claire without sentimentality. "You walked out of something broken with your daughter and your dignity and your years still ahead of you. That is not failure. That is one of the braver things I've seen." Claire had thought about that for days. Your years still ahead of you. She had been so focused on what she was losing that she had not, until Laurel said it out loud, turned around to look at what was opening behind her. Years. She was 34. Lily was 11 months. There were decades in front of both of them, and they were going to spend those decades together, and they were going to be fine. She knew that now in her body, not just in her mind. Not an argument she had constructed. A thing she knew. In April, she got a letter from her college roommate she hadn't spoken to in 3 years. The roommate had heard, through the roundabout way news travels, that Claire had gone through a divorce. The letter was handwritten, 2 pages, careful and honest. At the end it said, "I just wanted you to know I was thinking about you, and that I always thought you were one of the strongest people I'd ever met. I think that's probably more true now than ever. She read it twice. She wrote back. She had been writing more letters lately. She had always meant to. She had simply been busy being someone's wife, someone's future mother, busy inside the life she had arranged around someone else's shape. Now she had her own shape. She was still discovering what it looked like, but it was hers. On a Tuesday evening in late April, she pulled out the notebook. She had started keeping it in January, not a proper journal, more a running account of small things she noticed, things she was good at, things she wanted, things she was learning. She opened it to a fresh page. She wrote, "Things I know now that I did not know a year ago. I can hold still in a crisis. I can wait until I understand what I'm dealing with before I move." That is not weakness. That is precision. Cold water on the wrist works. My mother was right. My handwriting stays even when everything else is shaking. I make good pasta, the kind with lemon and capers. I should have made it years ago. I can negotiate. I can say a number and wait and get it. I can sit across from the person who is on the other side of the worst chapter of my life and walk away without burning anything down. That takes more strength than burning it down would have. My daughter is remarkable. She is specific and determined, and she has opinions about ceiling fans. She is the best thing I have ever done. Laurel's gray dog is named Biscuit, and he has strong feelings about squirrels. This is important. Starting over is not the same thing as starting from nothing. I am starting from everything I have learned and everything I am. She looked at the list. She added one more line. I was always going to be okay. I just didn't know it yet. She put the notebook away. She finished her tea. She sat in the kitchen in the April light and thought about the woman who had stood at this very counter 11 months ago, barefoot, 34 weeks pregnant, hearing a voicemail that wasn't meant for her. That woman had been blindsided. She had been inside a life she'd built carefully, a life she believed in entirely, and in a matter of seconds, the ground had shifted under her without warning. She had stood there and felt something collapse. She had been wrong about her marriage, but she had been right about herself. She had been right that she could hold it together in the dark. She had been right that she was more than what had been done to her. She had been right that her daughter was going to be okay, and that she was going to be okay, and that there was ground under all of it, solid, real ground, if she could only find it. She had found it. Not because she was exceptional. Not because she had some special reserve of strength that other women didn't. Because she had been paying attention. Because she had waited until she understood what she was dealing with. Because she had allowed herself to grieve and to be angry and to sit in the darkest part of it without turning away. Because she had asked herself what she actually wanted instead of what would be easiest. Because she had chosen truth over comfort, even when truth was harder. Because she had signed those papers with even handwriting. That was all. That was everything. She got up from the table. She carried her mug to the sink. She rinsed it and set it in the drying rack. She looked out the window at the April evening. Outside, the tree in the backyard was full of new leaves, dense and green and entirely indifferent to everything that had happened underneath it this past year. The light was doing what April light does, staying longer than expected. That particular golden stubbornness of spring evenings that always feels like a small argument against despair. She watched it for a while. She thought, I am not the same woman who stood here a year ago. She was quieter in some ways, less patient with things she hadn't chosen to be patient with, less inclined towards smallness her own or anyone else's, more capable than she had known, because she had not known what she was capable of until she had needed to find out. She was more herself, not a better self, as though the old version had been a mistake, not a healed self, as though she had been broken and repaired, just more present in her own life, more honestly occupying her own days, more clear about what she needed and what she was worth and what she would not again pretend to be satisfied with. She was 34 years old. Her daughter was almost a year old. She had a job she was good at and a house that was hers and a morning walk with a woman who told her things without apology. She had a mother who would drive 5 hours without being asked. She had a friend who showed up with croissants at 7:20 in the morning. She had in Lily's other room a small person who had decided ceiling fans were fascinating and hats were not to be trusted. She had a life. It looked nothing like the one she had planned. It was entirely hers. She dried her hands on the kitchen towel. She turned off the light. She walked down the hall to Lily's room. She stood in the doorway in the dark. She could hear her breathing soft and steady and entirely unconscious. The breathing of someone who had not yet had occasion to worry about anything. The breathing of someone for whom the whole world was still new and interesting and mostly trustworthy. Claire stood in the doorway and listened. She thought, I am going to give her a good life. Not a perfect one, not a protected one, not a life sealed away from difficulty and loss and the particular devastation of being trusted by someone you trusted back. A real one. One where she sees what it looks like when her mother walked through the hardest things she had faced and came out the other side still standing. Still herself. More herself, actually. One where she learns, from watching, that the dark places are not the end of the story, that you can sit in them without disappearing, that you can choose honestly and survive the choosing. One where she knows, when it's her turn, and it will be her turn, because it is everyone's turn at something, that it can be done, that you can walk through a breaking and not be broken, that you can sign your name with even handwriting in the hardest room you've ever sat in, and drive home with the windows down in January, and make pasta with lemon and capers, and turn the music up loud, and stand in the doorway of your daughter's room in the dark and know, with everything you are, that you are going to be fine. Claire pressed her fingertips lightly to the doorframe. "Good night, Lily," she said. Lily breathed in, out. The house was quiet. Outside, the April evening held its light a little longer, the way it always does in spring, as if the day has something more to say and is not quite ready to stop saying it. Claire turned from the doorway. She walked down the hall. She went into her bedroom. Her bedroom, the window on the left, the photograph above the dresser, the light in the morning that she had arranged to be the first thing she saw. She got into bed. She closed her eyes. She slept.